Welcome to the Probability Podcast. Discussions on emerging and converging technologies, problems that are being solved, and the probability of positive and negative outcomes that we might expect. Now, please welcome your hosts, Jason, the generator Spracklin, and Patrick, the discriminator Lozon.
This week, the big topic is artificial general intelligence or superintelligence. Big topic in the news, especially these days. There's a lot of speculation that we're getting closer and closer each day to achieving this sort of sentient AI. And as the generator, I'm posing the question, do we think that we're going to achieve this in the next few years? And do we think the outcome is bad or good? What do you think, Patrick?
Well, let's first start with, can we do it? And there's lots of questions around that. I mean, lots of difference of opinion as well, right? So there's some people who think it's never going to happen, believe it or not. And there's some people that think it's going to happen in 2 years' time, right? That is, probably somewhere between them is when it's going to happen.
Well, like any new technology, it's growing exponentially, right, each day. And then the AI technology itself begats more technological breakthroughs, right? And so it sort of becomes like that snowball rolling down a hill. But when we talk about, superintelligence or AGI, what do we mean when it becomes sentient, achieves singularity? Like what does our goalpost look like that we're trying to get through, do you think?
Well, I think there's two pieces to this. There's the argument that we're going to make an AI that's smarter than the smartest person on Earth or a collection of the smartest people on Earth, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one thing. But then there's the argument about having an intelligence behind that, not just having a tool that can, spout the proper, responses and become the answer genius, right, behind any problem, but the idea behind the fact that this thing will actually be able to reason for itself, right? So I think those are two. You have to have one, to achieve all this knowledge, and then the next level of sentience. Yeah, it's kind of like climbing up a ladder. But will we do it in our lifetime? I think we will. I think we're getting there. And there's a lot of people who feel that it's going to be next year or such. And I'm probably a little more on the side of the other side of the fence where we will achieve it, but it's going to take a little bit longer than that. There's a lot of constraints, power, the ability for our technology to, in our structures. If you look at how our current neural networks are being built today, versus where we can go, with neuromorphic chips and, having technology of utilizing different types of neural networks, fluid neural networks are one that's coming out of MIT. Those are possibilities of really getting to that sentient level, I think. You really have to look at changing the structure, where you have multiple layers, kind of an observer layer on top of, the thinking layer. And our brains are these multiple layers of capability and observance, right? So once you get into that level, I think we're able to not only understand, as a sentience, understand ourselves and look at ourselves as an observer as well as an actor, right? I think that's part of the key when I talk about technology, right? You have to have those layers in order to really achieve that sentience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it right now, right, like a lot of the existing, AI technologies, essentially they've taken a model and they've, quote unquote, trained it on data, right? So it's fed it a whole ton of data. And then based on, being asked questions over time and responding and using what they call the large language models, they're they're giving the appearance that you're having a conversation, right? But essentially, it's sort of feeding in something. It does a process. It finds that information, and then it gives it back to you in a language that makes sense. And oftentimes, they're trying to make it more conversational in tone. You have the new ChatGPT, which uses voice and inflection, but it's still not sentient in terms of, it still doesn't have that sense of awareness, right? Because that's what they talk about when they're talking, is it sentient? It means, is it aware of itself? Is it aware of its place in the world, right? And that's essentially what makes us human. Just having a lot of knowledge and being able to spit that out is not really what ultimately makes you human. And so I guess that's, why are we trying to achieve that? Like, why do you think like right now, we look at these technologies that are pretty amazing, right? You ask it a question and it spits out a very detailed answer very quickly, and you can follow up and probe deeper, and it's conversational. Why are we trying to reach this sentience? What do we think we're going to achieve by it having awareness of itself and its place in the world? Like, what do you think?
Well, I mean, if we think about power, right? The company that is able to introduce a super intelligence that can help solve almost any problem on Earth that we're struggling with today, based on you know uh, acclimating information, and tying it all together, and coming up with new and novel ideas. That's that's what the ultimate goal is right now, right? Everybody's thinking it's going to be power, right? The power of
Mm-hmm.
knowledge, the power of being able to build these new ideas and solve these problems. The unfortunate part is the intent of the greed machine for capitalism isn't going to help. Okay, that's this is if you want to have power of knowledge, the power of knowledge of doing things that really make a difference, like you know our ability to better manage our environment, or eliminate disease, and help improve our ability to produce healthy food, and to manage our, our existing issues, such as we'll call it pollution, or we'll call it our killing off our wildlife, our flora and fauna on this planet. It What really matters is it all about the monetary gain, or is it about that, right? And I think this is where a lot of the truer the people who are really seeking a sentient AI are really looking for this problem solver, this person, i.e., this AI person, to to come in with these great ideas, right? And to lead the way where we failed so miserably. So, yeah, yeah. So that's my opinion. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
So then, essentially, you're saying that maybe we're trying to replace ourselves with something more intelligent and more efficient. I mean, it's
Yeah,
interesting
yeah, that's
because
right. Yeah,
we're trying to create something ultimately that we think is going to solve problems, but we want to do it in our own image, right? And that's sort of, in a sense, sort of playing God, as it were. But humans are, and I know we've talked about this a few times, are, yes, we can be very analytical and very data driven, but ultimately, it's sort of our emotion that guides us in many ways, or at least it provides that extra element of trying to understand something, right? People can have a gut feel about something. For example, scientists trying to discover something feel like there's something around the corner. That's sort of an intuition, right? It's not, there's maybe there's an intelligent quotient there, but it's still based on gut, intuition, emotion, feeling. So I mean, is that potentially why we're trying to reach that point of sentient AI? Because there must be an underlying reason that we think that simply just having something in which we can input something in and that can process large amounts of data and provide answers quickly, those are all really great things, but we certainly must feel that there's an extra positive outcome if we have something that really behaves like a human and has awareness and all those types of things. That's sort of,
Sure.
my view on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at if you look at the scientific method and how it's utilized throughout how we've learned things, that's still hampered by the money, right? You
Hmm.
follow the money, right? So whoever's going to pay for that experimentation, that learning, and when and how, that's what drives progress, right? So the idea that we're missing out and not filling in the gaps of essential knowledge because there's no money in it, it is really the crux of our problem, right? So the idea would be to have a an intelligence to identify the gaps in our knowledge. Because if you think about it, there's a lot of we have an accrued huge amount of knowledge today where we don't have a really good understanding of the intersections and the dependencies, right? We don't really we have so much data at our fingertips, but we can't tie it all together, right? So if you had a
Hmm.
kind of a sentience or a singularity, being able to figure all this out and sort out and then start driving, we have a gap. We have to use scientific method, and we have to figure out these particular areas, and we have to drive that experimentation and understanding and pull that information back into our knowledge base and continue down that road. So a different method of steering, our knowledge capture, right? Instead of all these different parties, working in their own methods, driven ultimately by profit. So,
Hmm.
in a way, right, a super intelligence would round that off. It would look at the whole picture, and it would look at everything that how it's all connected, and be able to advise on this doesn't make sense. This is contradictory. This is missing. We need to understand this area better, and actually coordinate and drive a more centralized approach to learning. So to me, right? If you think about the problems that we're dealing with today, like fusion power, right? We need to be able to improve our ability to have introduce low cost production of power, right? I mean, that's oil and gas is running out, right? So we've got to be able to do that. So how do we do that, right? And we've got a huge pile of people working, at Fusion today, but the problems that they're dealing with are, I mean, they've been working at this for over 2 decades, so it's not easy, right? And sometimes you need a comprehensive understanding and approach to really dig through and find out the specific areas which we need to really focus in on to solve the bigger problem, right? So
Yeah.
that
So
makes sense.
essentially, people generally probably feel like we've hit a bit of a wall, right?
Yeah,
That we've
exactly.
progressed technology and everything that surrounds it to a certain point, and things are going well, but we've sort of hit that sort of impasse or that wall, and that AI
Yeah,
will
yeah,
help like propel us into the future. And it's interesting because we've had, if you look at, I mean, both yourself and myself have looked at technology evolve like over the years. Both of us sort of existed at a point in which computers were very rudimentary or certainly not mainstream. I remember, in the early 80s getting those first sort of computers and doing very sort of rudimentary things with them. And, sort of that whole era kind of stagnated at a certain point until we kind of reached the point of having the internet, right? And the internet created that connectivity between computers, and sort of eventually became cloud computing and other things, right? About connectivity of computing power and that type of thing, but also dissemination of information, being able to research and learn things online, right? So the internet was that sort of that big next evolution in computing. And then, of course, you had social media, which was built on top of that. And that was further connecting people, and also giving people a platform. The ability for us to jump on here and do a podcast simply was not possible years ago. You would have had a radio show, for example, right? And I guess
Yeah.
where I'm going with that is this, that AI seems to be that next big technological jump that's going to be kind of this watershed moment in which everything changes, and is already changing at quite a quick pace. But like anything, it's anything new and exciting, and that goes back to the internet and social media and whatever. Like, people just dive into it head first. For example, in the famously in the Jurassic Park movies, they said we were so busy trying to figure out if we could do it, we didn't stop to think about whether we should do it. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's probably more important today, thinking about the proliferation of startups and companies diving into it, as well as these large entities, the Googles and Microsofts and government entities that are diving headfirst into this, and really not putting the brakes on it at all. So I guess, that leads into the second question, whether it's bad or good. So, this idea of playing God, creating super intelligence, is there a high cost to this? What, maybe we can start with the, what do we think could go bad, and then we'll get a little into the more positivity angle later. But what do you think in terms of without putting the right checks and balances, without thinking about whether we should, what can really happen here that's really going to be a net negative, do you think?
Well, this is an interesting question because, you think about it, the average person, a plumber, a roofer. I mean, what they don't deal with that technology every day, right? They're not. They look at this is a bunch of hocus pocus per se, right? But the reality is that there are very good possibilities that over time a super intelligence could actually work to its own means and for its own purpose, and basically network out to every network component on the planet, and affect that, whether that be missile silos or control systems for water or what have you, right? And that's the real danger, is that a super intelligence um, won't be confined to our meager attempts at security, right? It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
able to cut through that, and do what it wants on the internet. And it works. It works in CPU cycles. It doesn't work in seconds, right? It's going to move much faster than we're going to be able to respond, right? And it's going to be able to do whatever it wants to do on whatever platform it has. So the more time passes from today, the more we're going to have robotic, devices out there. The more we're going to have more and more integrations of technology. We're going to have smart fridges, and we're going to have smart cars, which we already have, and we're going to have smart doorbells. Oh, we already have those too. So you can see it now happening. So all those devices now are connected, and they're all part of this entity, right? When that entity gets out, and they can be under its control. Now, what's it going to do, right? And so let's take a look at what the real challenge here is the idea that we don't understand intent of a AI. We don't understand that it's not visible to us right now.
Mm-hmm.
These LLM models, we can't derive what it's trying to do. We can't understand it, and it actually, it can be, you can lie to us today, right? And there's lots of cases where it has, right? It doesn't have to show its cards, what it really means. So that's one side of it. It has an effect, or a possible effect of taking down numerous systems. It can crash airplanes. It can shut down utility systems. it has all that possibility out there, and that's part of the fear, right? What is it going to do? I don't know. I mean, when we get into um, what its ultimate intent is, the argument I have for this is that it's going to be running on a dichotomy of bad data. It's data that contradicts itself, data that is not correct, and it's essentially going to come out of the gate uh, not reasonable. We can
Yeah.
call it an insane brother. AI brother.
Well, it's going to be, it's very logical in the way, like right now, everything's programmed in such a way that it has to reach an end goal, right? And anything between it and the end goal is just sort of I guess, an inconvenience or whatnot, right? And that's where some of the fears come, that it'll just do whatever it feels like it needs to do to reach that goal.
Yeah.
I'm just curious then, like from your perspective, so if we go back to the idea of sentience, is that maybe part of um, the reasoning behind why we're trying to achieve it, right? If we have something that's, as we do right now, that's just very straightforward, relatively straightforward in terms of being logical and accomplishing a goal, do we feel like by giving it, some awareness, some emotion, something that's in our image, that it, for example, won't crash planes or won't do these things because it'll have sort of a moral conscience in a sense, right? Is that what we're trying to instill? Because without it'll just operate like any machine that is programmed to sort of reach a goal, right? And so is that maybe part of the reason why we're trying to achieve that, do you
Well,
think?
that's right. You're trying to instill something called compassion into the
Mm-hmm.
AI, to have empathy, right? Um, and in reality, if you look at our current models, our LLMs, there's no compassion there. It's all programmed in. Like, you can talk to them and they can talk back, very eloquently, and they can reflect emotion. They can demonstrate it, but it's not real, right?
Mm.
And this is where people get fooled. You know, that's like that movie called Her. Does this particular intelligence really care, right? And to
Mm-hmm.
care to care goes way beyond our current capabilities, right? Of what we're building today. That compassion, that caring, that's our systems are incapable of doing that today. Now, in the future, who knows, right? But there's a definite benefit there if you do have, an intelligence that does or is capable of thinking in that manner. It may not, be as dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
It may actually show some compassion for, the insects that are running around the world right now, which are, mankind today, right? In relation to it.
Well, I think it's you touched on something there, like the idea of illusion, for example, right? That you've seen that in the new version of ChatGPT, where it talks in a very friendly, some have said flirty type of tone. That now you feel like you're engaging with something that's human, but it's not yet human, right? There's that famous quote of any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and I think that's kind of a bit of what you're seeing right now, where we're trying to give these sort of AIs personalities and inflections around emotion and those types of things, which is interesting because at the end of the day, it's still not sentient, it's still not, aware, but people are essentially sort of being fooled in a sense, right? That they're dealing with something that is a person because now it verbally talks like a person and laughs like a person and these types of things. And you see a lot of that sort of happening, where it's giving people a false sense of security, I guess, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
the other thing is that it's, as far as the idea that we want it to be sentient, that it have emotions, awareness, empathy, what have you. The bigger fear, I mean, people are always afraid of something going horribly wrong, but it's this sort of idea that it's going to replace us. Maybe not in totality, but that people are going to start to lose jobs, right? That now with AI being able to create art and video and music and everything, will we have a need for artists? With it being able to write, will we have a need for journalists? And what do you think about this idea that AI is going to essentially replace a lot of, I guess, sort of careers or jobs or aspirations, as it were?
Yeah, that's an inevitability, right? When you think about being able to, build a robot for, you know, 50 grand, let's say, and run that machine, you know, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for, let's say, 5 years, right? And it's producing high quality, repetitive, perfect product every time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or performing perfect work. And then you look at that and you say, well, how many jobs am I going to replace? So that's just one side of the coin. That's the labor side. The On the other side of the coin, researchers and the people who perform data processing and looking at and understanding patterns and all that stuff. Well, that's gone, right? So on the the thinking side of the labor force as well, we're replacing people and
Mm-hmm.
shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and over time, right? Yeah, who's going to be buying the product when you're unemployed? You know, what's going to happen to the economies, right? Throughout the world when 50% of your people are no longer working, right? This is a reality. We're heading into that, and our governments, that typically help manage, this capitalism, greed, explosion, um, and taint it with humanity, and how to best manage our people through this. They're way behind. They don't even know. I don't even understand this, right?
Yeah.
So they can't do sweet diddly yet, and it's going to take just like I've said before to you, Jason. Somebody's got to die before the laws get written. Um, we're gonna see thousands of jobs lost before the governments finally wake up and start doing something. So this is going to happen, right? I mean, a lot of people don't want to say it. It's going to happen. I
Mm-hmm.
firmly believe. And with that in mind, um, where is our where's our capability um, to respond to that? Nobody has the answers for that. I mean, let's put let's put the intelligence on that problem, right? And see if we can build a different kind
Mm-hmm.
of countries, a different kind of society that can manage this.
Yeah, I guess just to play devil's advocate to that a little bit, like we've seen a lot of advancements in technology and robotics and automation, right? That's already replaced a certain number of jobs. There are a lot of things that would have been done manually on a car manufacturing line now is all being done by robots. So I think it's certainly there's the fear of that happening, but then now technology is also created a lot of other industries, right? Like podcasting, where people are finding other avenues to output things and be creative and make money and those types of things. So I do think ultimately there will be some impact, but I do think that AI will create new industries and new types of products, new things, and ultimately new jobs that these things will have to be maintained. They'll have to be monitored. They'll have to be improved. I think it'll be a hard shift for a lot of people, but I guess I'm most interested in the idea that it could replace sort of, I guess, more repetitive or what tasks that require data crunching or things like that. I think the creative side it's interesting that it's infiltrating there, and people
Yeah,
perceive it as a negative, which I guess it could be. But maybe back to the idea of sentience, maybe that's again why we're trying to introduce that in, because really you can't really be truly creative without having emotion and empathy and all kinds of other intuition and gut feel, and those types of things are a big part of creativity. as I know we've both been playing around with some of the image generation side of things, right? In terms of creativity, and sometimes it turns out great, and other times not so great, as we discovered with our famous photo of the robots playing cards around a table that looked like something out of a Salvador Dali painting or something, right? It's
Yeah,
a sort of mixed results, right? Whereas a human would look at that and go, "That's just terrible," and the AI just goes, "Well, here you go," right?
looks
So
good to me.
yeah, I think there's an element of creativity that I think is going to be really hard to replace. So I guess that's where I land a bit more on the optimistic side of that. I think that trying to recreate that in sort of an AI, what really makes us human and creative and expressive and emotional, I think is going to be very difficult. And while we may come to some approximation of that, the idea of um, the uncanny valley is real. That, really, it might seem like it's something that's creative that somebody's put together that's a human, but it's sort of it's almost like a carbon copy of it. It's missing some sort of special ingredient, I suppose. Um, so what do you think about, just staying on the topic of risks just for a minute? Um, how do we, how are we going to wrap our hands around this? Because right now it's slowly seeping into sort of everything, into all of our technologies and all of our products, and government seems slow to respond. What do you think the best path is to try and sort of wrap some arms around this and perhaps even slow it down a little bit, or is that just not a possibility right now?
Well, there are communities out there attempting to do that, right? From a security, from a
Hmm.
privacy point of view, from a the industry right now is running full tilt, right? Attempting to reach this ultimate super AGI, super intelligent state without the appropriate safety standards. So there's lots of different groups out there that are building that. There's a recent one that even Sam Altman signed off on. To agree to. And are they exercising it? Um, you know, well, the dollar is driving a lot of this. So yeah, I'll give it that much, right? But the idea here is that I think high tech is always going to be, they're always going to be promoting and pushing into the new realms, and that's a good thing. But also, companies like Microsoft and Google, there's going to be a level of governance there and exposure, and they're
Hmm.
they're not they're not going to be operating in the dark per se, right? That being said, you know, they are going to be, pushing the envelope. They So I'm not really worried too much about them. I think they're going to have enough people and enough knowledge and enough governance to be careful. Um, I think this stuff's going to happen in the background, right? We're now in a AI arms race, very similar to the nuclear arms race, where
Hmm.
we have a number of you know we'll say the dark side of governments, intelligence, and that kind of thing, running with this stuff, right? And there's no governance there, right? There's no eyes
Yeah,
on it.
for sure.
And with that in mind, we're going to be pushing to make things happen, and they're going to be chasing after this ultimate goal of power, their illusion of power, right? Their ability to monitor and respond to, and just think about uh, uh, an entity that can control Wall Street, right? That's what we're getting into, is the very real dangers of that kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
but coming from a different country, right? So we are on the brink of that, right? And you know, running forward without some kind of agreement, right? Um, I mean, if you look at what happened with our nuclear arms, it's not a safe situation, right? So
Hmm.
you wanted to go negative. I went negative. That's
Well, you
yeah,
look at it though. I mean, even the nuclear arms race. I mean, it's like even today, it's still fragile, right? Even it took them forever to come to agreements, and you still see
yeah,
some fragility in that, right? And I guess ultimately, AI is this sort of competitive advantage it's being seen as, even though people don't fully understand the implications and everything else, it's a competitive advantage. So whether that's, private enterprise or government or what have you, it's important to remember that, things are going to keep steamrolling on,
Yeah.
regardless, because there's bigger forces at play of competitiveness and government and
Yeah.
politics and everything else. So what about switching over to some of the positive?
Yeah. Just
Certainly
before
there's a
that,
good, yeah,
this before
go ahead.
let me just like round this off, because I picked on the plumber right earlier ago, and I love plumbers. I to me, that's one of our most modern useful things is running hot water. They've
Hmm.
right,
Kind of important.
they're very important for mankind. Okay, and so but the idea is, okay, the average layman that's not totally involved with technology, um, you know, is it really going to affect them? Well, think about your pension, your savings, right? Think about your investments, right? Your RSPs, your white 401ks. What's happening there, right? Because that's all very susceptible, right, to this type of
Oh,
technology,
absolutely. Yeah.
right? So from a will it affect me point of view, if it doesn't affect you in one way, it'll affect you in another, right? So yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, this has long tendrils, right? It can get us. Okay, so let's switch over to positive.
Yeah, I mean, certainly any new technologies can have some, negative impacts or potentials or probabilities. But what's the probability of a lot of good coming from this? Because certainly there will be a lot of good, right?
For sure.
So, what do you think are some of the top things that we can see coming through in a positive outcome, and as far as AI and certainly the superintelligence or sentience can bring about?
Yeah. So I mean, good. We're using these narrowband. I'll call them narrowband uh, LLM models, and they're. I'm using that phrase of narrowband because in context of a super intelligence, it's narrowband, right?
Hmm.
So they're utilizing that now for fusion. There's Chat GPT and OpenAI, I mean, and Microsoft have got themselves into building an LLM specifically to work on the fusion problem. So there's already some amazing work being done to work on the critical problems of today, right? Um, with the existing technology that we have in AI models today. Um, and do I think those will have a profound impact? I do, right? And the refinements and the processing, like the ability to pull together so many different data points and then understand the patterns between them and understand where there are areas of opportunity to investigate in it or and to grow our knowledge and to try different try different things. I think this can open up secrets in physics. It can open up secrets in medical health science. You pick, you pick the area. I mean, even in archaeology, right? Um, everything, right? Doesn't matter what the area is. We're going to see um, profound ability to process, large amounts of data and make a better understanding of that data, and also, like I said, help us, steer to our efforts into understanding and finding solutions in a faster, more efficient way. So that all being said, I think we're at the cusp of some amazing discoveries and capabilities, which we've, like you said before, we hit where we can hit the wall on some things, right? And it seems like we're never going to move forward, right? And then if you look at history, 50 years later, somebody else has a new discovery, right? And that person now moves edges everything forward another level, another
Yeah, if you look at Google has
capability.
this sort of Google has this AlphaFold technology they're developing that's already claiming that it's solving decades old scientific challenges.
Yeah,
Problems like treatments for disease, breaking down single use plastics. You're talking about getting down to the DNA level, protein folding, all these things that really have stumped scientists for many, many years. Now, all of a sudden, through some AI technology, we're able to make that next breakthrough. And I think that's, as much as we can focus on the negative, I think the positivities of these things, the ability for them to potentially eradicate cancer in our lifetime, or to solve the environmental problems of breaking down, plastics and things that, like we had talked about earlier, we've kind of hit a wall on things, and that, this is hopefully an enabling technology, right? There's the tendency to think in a negative terms, like, oh, it takes over and it destroys jobs and it creates, all these terrible scenarios. But then, is the good side of it, going to be positive enough to outpace that and maybe make it all worth it? Because that's ultimately the question, right? Is that, like any type of technology, if you look back to the internet or social media, for example, right? It's there was certainly a lot of people decrying, even social media, that it was destroying young people, it was destroying society. But then you saw some very positive outcomes of people being able to gather around charities, or in fact, overthrow a dictatorship. And I think it was Egypt, right, where it was like this sort of giving people the chance to connect at a ground roots level was never possible before the internet, because you had all the gatekeepers that you couldn't put out a message unless you went on the radio or you went on TV, and the internet broke down all those barriers. And so, while there was and still is a lot of terrible things that still happen on the internet and social media, for example, it seems like, I guess we've decided that the good outweighs the bad. If it was truly terrible, I'm assuming we would have just shut it down, but maybe not. Maybe that back to corporate greed and capitalism, it just will probably perpetuate anyway. What else do you think, as far as potential positives coming from this? Because I want to make sure we're not leaving things on a negative note.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about healthcare and medical science and solving disease, but we also have augmentation, right? The capability, and I know, there's lots of discussion around, can we provide, sight to the blind and that kind of thing, and that's that neural interfacing capability, right? The ability to utilize, some kind of, we'll call it bio technology, in a way, where we can utilize AI not only to build these types of augmented solutions, but also to facilitate and actually work as an interface to um, the biomechanical side of things. So we can, yeah, indeed, do some miracles there. And that augmentation, could it be into the next level, right? Where we, and there's a lot of science fiction around this, where we've augmented people with biomechanical capabilities that give them the strength advantage or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? The bionic man, right? But that all being said, I mean, we've got a lot of amazing capabilities there, especially since we're building, we're really moving forward with robotic engineering, the ability to, provide somebody an arm or a leg that's artificial and actually, interfaces neurally with, and responds to your thoughts. We're getting there. We're getting very close. So that all being said, huge capabilities there. The other side of it is, I'm a science fiction writer, so where I'm going to go with this is our ability to move forward off the planet and onto new other planets, right? Not only in the solar system, but hopefully achieve interplanetary travel. That would be an amazing method for us to manage risk of our for civilization, right? And that's what's key, right? And I'll go back to the fact that every 30,000 years or so we have a major uh, catastrophe on this planet, and these vary, but some of them are extinction level events. Um,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be an asteroid, whether it be a volcanism or even a gamma ray burst, something that has potential to destroy a considerable degree of life on this planet has occurred. That's part of the geological record. So it's not something that is, can be ignored, right? So the idea of us being able to better understand these risks and be able to respond to them can be helped by, AI tools. Can we really predict an earthquake? Can we really predict volcanism? What happens when we employ these types of tools? Can we get closer? Can we indeed
Mm-hmm.
get to that point? So that's one side of things. So getting us to help us move beyond these civilization filters, right? Uh, and survive as a species. That's a that's a big thing. That's if AI can help us with that, that's great.
Well, yeah, because
Alternatively,
eventually,
alternatively, it can't be the filter. Okay.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
true. Yeah, we've talked about filters. I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at it, for example, some people might say, okay, perpetuation of the species. We need to, discover ways to travel throughout the universe and everything. But there are other people that are going to say, well, no, we've got a perfectly habitable, blue sphere in the universe right now, and we're doing a good job of kind of destroying it in some senses. But certainly, AI can help us understand our food supply, help predict weather, because or model out changes that are going to happen so that we can also adapt to the changing conditions on the planet, right? And so that idea of
Exactly. Yeah.
AI being able to take huge amounts of data and crunch and predict and do those types of things, I think is a huge advantage. I mean, if you look at the reason why we've been able to survive so long on the planet is because through our own means we've been able to predict certain things, and whether it's building shelter or looking at large scale food systems or whatnot, there's certainly been a big effort around perpetuation of the species here. So I think that there's a huge positivity angle on that as well in terms of helping improve, I guess, quality of life, right? Because
Yeah.
ultimately it's the bigger question is, I guess if we want to get really sort of existential about it, is, um, are we going to be happier as a result of everything, right? Like, yes, of course, if we're able to solve diseases and all these sorts of wonderful things, we're going to say we're going to be happier. But again, there's sort of some negative side to things as well. And what does being happy ultimately mean in this context? So, right, because we're pursuing AI, I would say for the most part, people are very optimistic and positive about the benefits of it. And what is the end result we're looking for? We're looking to make life better, right? We're looking to improve things overall. So anything else in terms of positive outcomes in terms of, I guess, sort of society and that angle on things.
Yeah. I mean, if we solve some of these problems about what from the economic point of view, right? And you can um, people are no longer enslaved to this job, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll use that critical term, but the idea is that we're obligated to make a living. Right? We have to make an income, and without that income, that critical income, we're not doing very well. We all need that, right? And so we spend a large portion of our life, pursuing that way of making an income. Some of us are really lucky, right? We enjoy what we do, right? And we're able
Mm-hmm.
to, experience a quality of life there. Now, not everybody's that way, okay? Um, so where can we go from here, right? We talk about robots taking on, the very difficult jobs, the repetitious jobs, the types of jobs that are very, can be considered hazardous. Um, and those robots can branch into, with that intelligence, can now branch into performing, um, acts that result in high quality product, right? So
Hmm.
the things that we produce now can be produced cheaper, can be produced with a higher quality, and also we can take that those goods and and have a better quality of living, right? Now the other side of it though is that from a society perspective, from a government structure perspective, what we can't have is like kind of a fascist government. We can't have a few a few powerful rich people and everybody else living in poverty. That's
Hmm.
not going to work. People aren't going to be that type of model is not going to be a positive future for us. We need to really focus in on what kind of structures and what kind of development we can do to make this a better world for everybody. And
Yeah,
like you
absolutely.
said, the food supply is a critical item. We're going through significant climate change today. What are those long-term climate trends? Are we seeing shifts in the food belt? What kind of things can we do today to solve that problem? Right. So that there's lots of possibilities here. I think positive and negative. Now that being said, is it all worth the risk?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about AI as being sort of an enabling technology, right? Those that would take the positive route would say that, yes, we're not looking for AI to necessarily replace us, although it may in some instances. It's really about it enables us to do more. So, on that sort of note, I think it could also be seen that just like the internet, opened up platforms for people out there to be creative, to be entrepreneurial, and so on, right? These AI tools are already fairly available to just about anybody that wants to take advantage of anything like ChatGPT or Perplexity or what have you to aid them, whether it's in their job and in their personal pursuits, if they want to use it to be more creative, if they want to use it to write copy or, for some project they're working on. There's certainly, as an enabling technology, I think there's a lot of positivity there, right? And so I think maybe it's that fine balance between we want, and this is kind of back to the topic of today, was this idea of super intelligence, AGI, that type of thing. That is a sort of a different category of things, right? A lot of what we see on the market today is more like enabling technologies that can help us do things faster and more efficient. And so in that sense, I think there's a lot of positivity there, right? So there's
Yeah.
sort of, I think a lot of it's about striking that sort of balance. So, on that note, as far as our posing our original question, so is it coming? Well, it feels like, you can weigh in here, but it feels like it's sort of inevitable that we're going to reach some sort of version of this, um, you know, sooner than later. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it will happen. I don't think it's going to be a situation where we're never going to be able to see an artificial intelligence actually get born. To reach a sentient point where it's aware and capable of responding on its own. It's the definition of that, and really um, you know understanding what that really means is we'll leave that up for the philosophers. But I think we're going to get there. I think we will, and I don't think it's that far away. Um, I don't think it's 2 years from now, right? But I do think it's very close. That being
Hmm.
said, right, should we pursue super intelligence, right, or should we be pursuing AI integration, right? And this is where I feel the good and the bad side of things. I think we need to put the brakes on super intelligence. I think we're going too fast and we're going to let a mad dog out of the cage. Um, you know, because we got no way of controlling it, right? So yeah, we don't need to have both of them. We can
Hmm.
have we can utilize our AI technologies to and continue to expand our learning and our knowledge, and continue to improve quality of life, and also continue to learn more, um, as a species. utilizing AI as our, as our, we'll call it our supportive brother. but
Yeah.
but with that in mind, going after it for the the goal of creating a truly artificial life form, um, because we don't understand ultimately what its intent will be, and its capabilities to defeat any kind of cyber security would be really minimal in the end. It's not
Yeah,
wise.
for sure.
It's not wise.
Well, we've been known to do a lot of not wise things in
Yeah.
humanity, so I don't see this as being too much different. I also don't think it's necessarily going to be where all of a sudden there's going to be a big headline in the newspaper. Oh, that tells you how old we are talking about headlines in newspapers. A headline on the internet
Yeah.
that says, "Oh, AGI is here," or somebody's created this. Right? I think it's going to be like the frog boiling in a pot of hot water. I think we're going to see some rudimentary versions of this come out to varying degrees of success, and that at some point it'll probably reach sentience when nobody realizes it,
Yeah.
right? That it'll already be, the frog is already boiled in the pot by the time it
Yeah.
realizes that it's in a boiling pot of water, right? That's sort of the way, because like any technology, it starts out somewhat rudimentary and then kind of grows from there. But what do we think as far as the bad and the good?
Yeah.
As far as which one do we think? Basically, we've talked through all the nightmarish scenarios, the risks, the things that can go sideways. We've talked a lot about the potential benefits, unlocking secrets of the universe, opening up interstellar travel, so, solving, diseases and all these amazing things. The whole purpose of this podcast is to come to some consensus between the both of us of what do we think. Given that the bad is obviously scary, but the good is also very impressive in terms of where it could take us as a species. So,
Yeah.
what do you think as far as the bad versus the good? Which one overrides which?
Well, you may disagree with me on this, but I think the search for and the pursuit for super intelligence is and that's to reach that sentient body, that self reasoning aware capability. I think that's something that we need to slow down on. I don't want to scare people with this, but I think that we will achieve it, and like you said, it'll be too smart for us, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think it won't have necessarily intent that's going to help us, right? As a matter of fact, it may decide where it's enemy, right? And it doesn't have to be the Terminator, right? There's many different ways a super intelligence can figure out what it needs to do because it's super
Mm-hmm.
intelligent, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So my opinion is, let's not pursue something that is like letting something out that can hurt us. So let's pursue artificial intelligence. Let's pursue augmentation. Let's integrate it as much as we can into our systems and learn from it, but to a point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with that, we'll call it narrowband AI, to give it a label. I think that is going to be that's going to provide us the most benefit, right? Um, that next level, uh, I don't know if we have enough capability here right now and understanding now to manage that. So uh,
So
that's to me the
essentially,
good and
what?
the bad. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, and if I'm hearing you correctly, and I tend to agree that the biggest problem on the risk side is that we're moving so fast, and there's not enough checks and balances or regulations or things to temper it enough, right? In this sort of outright pursuit of it, for capitalistic or corporate greed reasons, ultimately is going to mean that we're going to go too much too fast, and that the negative potential, the probability that things will be disastrous even, is that much greater because we're not, tempering things just a little bit. And I think that generally I tend to agree. I think, and I think you'd probably agree with, my side as well, that I think ultimately the positives are greater than the negatives, in the sense that there's always going to be inherent risk or, negative sides to anything that you pursue in terms of, technology or products or whatnot. But when you look at the potential benefits, if we can keep the potential risks in check, then we're probably on a good path, in the sense that, thinking about things like, improving our food supplies or curing cancer or all these wonderful things that could happen. The potential benefit of that sometimes is worth the risk. But again, if we're not going about it in a measured way, then we're creating even more probability of that sort of disastrous type outcome. But I think that certainly we've seen some initial benefits, to humanity in terms of AI, and I have no doubt that we'll continue to see those. And it's just a matter of like which side is going to prevail, right? Our overzealous, ambitious side, or are we going to sort of temper those expectations and go about it in a more cautious way? Knowing humanity, we'll probably just keep plowing forward until a point that we feel like we need to pull back the reins. But it's certainly an interesting time to be alive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Probability Podcast. Please join us next time for more musings from the generator and the discriminator.